Hi, my name is Steven Stronichek, and I'm with HorrOrigins.com. HorrOrigins.com is a website where you can find articles, interviews, and we also run our very own film festival and screenplay competition. Today, I'm talking to Matteo Ciotola. Close?
Ciotola, yes.
Ciotola,
Yeah.
all righty. Adam Wright, Paul Mortsolf, and Kalev Carrow about their particular work that was part of the HorrOrigins Film Festival. So, the first thing that I like to ask people, just to get things started, is I like to think that if you get into horror, you probably have like some deep emotional connection to some like weird horror thing. So what got you into horror?
Well, I'll go first. Okay. I don't like movies that thinks inside the box.
Mm,
Probably is this particular thing that attracted me since from the first time in horror. To me, cinema as a medium requires some kind of maximalist and visceral and uncompromising approach. So I made this short movie in particular, Come Entrato, that was a selection of this year's HorrOrigins, um, because I believe that we can be afraid of our own emotions, and that's something that I find very powerful in horror. This short has European influences, in particular, from the shocking imagery of the surrealist cinema that I think is deeply related to the horror genre. Overall, Maya Deren's surrealist short, Meshes of the Afternoon,
mhm,
but also the work of René Clair and Louis Buñuel, up to the visual legacy of German expressionisms, and Polanski's early horrors and that psychological shape, of the so-called Italian B movies of the
mhm.
60s, 70s, or film that we want, like Riccardo Freda used to call them. I'm talking about Dario Argento, Lucio Fulci, Mario Bava, Anderson Lamberto, Antonio Margheriti, Riccardo Freda himself. So, you know, I love that. I love those movies, and they deeply affected me since the first time I saw them.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's watching the work, the sound design and just the visuals, they give off that. They really give off definitely a sense of course, Argento, Fulci and stuff like that. Really, it comes out. It's awesome. And Adam, what brought you into the genre?
It's kind of funny because I can't really pretend to be a horror guy. Have really been, to be honest. Usually, when I'm coming up with ideas for films or writing an idea out, I never tend to think in terms of genre. It's usually an idea that I think is intriguing and interesting, and I'll execute on it. And usually, whatever I guess genre tends to be the best delivery for that idea is kind
Mhm.
of what happens. And I wrote this story, and it just so happened it came out as a horror.
I also found it quite funny, honestly. I
That's
mean, you
intended. That
got
was
that big flashing, just well, maximalist is a good way of putting it. Where it's just whoa. And Paul, your screenplays, they're they read very well, and they have some really interesting like research in there and really interesting influences. You can kind of see specific things hanging off of them. What drew you into the horror genre?
Well, my older brother dared me to watch Nightmare on Elm Street with him when I was about six or seven, and it scared the hell out of me, but I loved it because I wanted to figure out how they did it. Because I knew it's like they're not really hurting people, so how did they do it?
Hmm.
And which is interesting because now my brother cannot stomach horror movies at all, and he's the one that got me into it. But that and getting really into uh,
Mm-hmm.
Clive Barker books when I was a teenager, and always wanting to write. It just kind of meshed up that horror doesn't have to be uh, like what Matteo said, doesn't have to be in this one little box. Read a collection of Clive Barker short stories, and they're all beautiful, terrifying, grotesque, and they're all different. So there's a different shade for everyone. So I like to incorporate that. And a lot of playing on fears. Like my own personal fear, Innocence and a Guilty Mind, that screenplay started off with what scares me, not being able to trust or losing control of your own mind, not being able to trust your memories. And that's kind of where that kind of started. But that's how I got into horror, was good old Freddy Krueger.
Good old Freddy Krueger. Excellent, excellent. And finally, Kalev, last but not least, what got you into horror
What
genre?
into horror? Yeah, probably the forbidden nature of all of it. I grew up in I would say a rather religious upbringing. If you're familiar at all with
I am.
faithful nature of the southeastern United States. So, in rejection to that, a little bit in my early 20s, I started exploring more films that I was previously not allowed to watch or even mention.
Well, that's a better place to start than most. That's where I started, really. I mean, I started watching the weirdest shit I could find. But anyway, moving on. So your projects, they all capture such these interesting ideas, whether or not, of course, it be kind of elements of consumerism that come out in Bliss, or elements of the human mind that come out in Parasomnia or Markley Manor, or Comeo entrado. I just wanted to ask about specifically if you guys could just extrapolate on some of the themes that you really wanted to capture in your work.
I guess I'll go. Yeah, so it's Blissburger on its the most, I guess, kind of overt, themes and meanings and stuff that's very much on the surface is the consumerism and the dangers of trying to escape or find some kind of meaning through things. Whether it's, in the movie it's food, but it could be anything. But I guess I was really interested in that, but also what really kind of kept me interested in the story and the ideas behind it as I was working on it was, looking further into it and this idea of rebelling against or rejecting these values that our cultures instill in us, and what could maybe be the unintended consequences of that. And I don't know, I guess I'm in my mid 30s now, but when, in my younger 20s, it's like I went, through that phase where, I was raised in a religious household and all that stuff. So I went through the very rebellious stage of rejecting all of that pretty aggressively. And then as I'm getting older, I'm starting to look back and be like, well, maybe some of these values, some of these things that are that were presented to me, maybe there's some value in some of them, and rejecting them or running away from them led to a bit of things collapsing around me, life becoming unmanageable because these values kind of serve a purpose to hold things together. So there was like a lot of that I was thinking about and looking into as I was making it.
Yeah. I think it speaks to the power of horror that, it so well, latches onto things. And, I was thinking about this question for a moment, and if you would rather just leave the film where it is, you can. I mean, I don't whether or not you actually want to explain anything.
Right.
I think it depends on the film. Like, because I was lucky enough to have two feature screenplays as official selection, which is a huge honor. But they're both different. Innocence and a Guilty Mind is more of a psychological horror with some torture elements to it, but it's more of a mental game. And that, like I said, came out of the fear that I have. It's a personal fear I have of not being able to trust your own mind. Markley is like an ensemble cast, supernatural ghost story, that it gets bloody, and that came out of kind of interesting side note, going back to Nightmare on Elm Street. I directed a short film called Rest Stop, Stephen King adaptation, And I was lucky enough to get Amanda Wiss to be in the short film. She was really nice and really awesome, had great chemistry with everybody. And we only had her on set one day. And when she was leaving, she looked at me and she's like, okay, I had so much fun with you guys and everybody here, that you need to write a feature so we can all come back and work together. So I looked at the cast that I had in that short film and said, okay, how would I put all these people together into a movie? And I started road mapping it from there and making characters there. And based on the chemistry the actors had together on set, okay, these two would be a married couple, these two would be friends, and I just that's what actually started that story. So it wasn't really exploring a lot of theme. There was research involved with it and some just fun, but it was just more along the lines of writing more for an actor and a crew and a full cast than, oh, I've got this great idea. So.
I mean, yeah, there's no better reason to do it. I mean, you got to enjoy the people around you while you're making movies.
Yeah. And on the flip side of Innocence, I did a ton of research into psychology, hypnosis, the quote unquote, evil gene that some people believe we're born with, as far as being sociopathic from birth, nature versus nurture. And that was just, going and buying books and reading. And it started out as supposed to be a short film that I was going to do. It turned into the original draft was 135 pages. So not quite as short. But that's kind of where it depends on the project. Like with theme, it's like sometimes like I really have this story I want to tell, and sometimes it's like, it'd be really fun if we could make this. So.
Yeah. All right, Matteo, do you have anything to extrapolate on what the film is saying, or do you just want to let the film stand for itself?
Well, I have to say that I wanted my short film to feel like dreams. That was the main goal. This idea that the reality of things are, does not exist outside our own perception of them. And because ultimately we are all alone with ourselves. So it's sad, but it's true. And this is the idea of the aesthetic of the short, that a significant part of our existence takes place in our mind's eye. And that this later, if confronted with trauma, this can, our perception of things can become inseparable from reality itself. So, what is true, what isn't. We are too close to our own self to really see us for what we really are. And this was the main goal.
Excellent. And Kalev?
Okay, so the film Parasomnia was really about the regrets people have with the wrongs they've committed towards others. And those things that just kind of keep you up at night. But with Parasomnia itself, it was more of a circular story about a guy who keeps on putting himself through the same trauma of the same guilt that he's experienced and just going in circles. I don't really think there's much more that can be said about the film beyond that. The reason why we made it is we needed to make something. We didn't really have a script. We just kind of shot it and then we pieced it together after the fact and decided on a loose narrative.
Sometimes that happens. And hey, I mean, this time it worked out, and I've done that before, and it has not worked out at all. I like horror in some ways and I like making horror and writing horror because you get to kind of mess around with some creepy stuff. There's always that interesting, even if it's emotional horror, there's always this interesting type of crescendo of violence that kind of comes out of a horror project. And something that I always like asking people who work in horror is their philosophy towards that violence or so. Because, Paul, you talked about starting with Freddy Krueger, and in Blissburger, there's like this it's violence, but it's more like garishness. It's like the type of practical special effect that just makes your stomach twitch or something like that. I just wanted to ask about what is your approach to, showing that type of trauma, showing that type of stuff? Do you have any type of philosophy towards it?
I personally, when in the writing aspect of it, is I need to make the antagonist or the bad guy, or however you want to put it, as terrible as possible, to the point where, so it makes it more fulfilling when good triumphs over evil or like that. Even sometimes when they don't win, but just showing that, just digging in the depths of, unfortunately, some horrific things that humanity is capable of. But I kind of tend to push and go, okay, this person, this character just did that. That's not messed up enough. I need to push that further, just to make it. And also sometimes with the gore and things like that, I'll write something and I'm like, if I actually get to film this and show this to somebody, this is going to make people go, oh, wow, that was nasty. One of the best compliments I got from a writing friend of mine that I sent to read notes on Innocence was a year after she read it. And she sent me a message through Twitter. And it was just like, I still think about this one scene and it still creeps me out. And I'm like,
Awesome.
I did my job. That's but I think even with movies that are really graphic and really violent, there's a difference. You can tell when it's like, hey, we just had the ability to pull off this cool effect, or some of the splatter movies and some of the like horror comedies were the bigger, the messier, like that. And then there's also movies where it's like it's done on purpose to make the audience uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And as long as that pushes the story forward, I think that it's okay. It's not just, we're just going to make you feel uncomfortable for 90 minutes because we can. And like, it's very nihilistic. That's not my personal cup of tea, but some people really enjoy it. As long as it fits the story, and it's just one of those things, like, make your bad guy bad, make the evil really evil, make it really, if you want people happy at the end of the movie, or not, depending on the ending, but you want to see something, everything's got to continue up. You can't start up here and then drop down. I'm just rambling now at this point in time, but I just, do love, I appreciate a good gore gag in a movie. Yeah. But if it's like, okay, this happened at minute 35 and they blew their whole budget on that one thing, and the rest of the movie you don't see anything, it's like, okay, that could have been at the end, or they could have built up, or they could have split it up. It doesn't have to be huge and gory just for the sake of it. But if it fits the story, then it helps push it. Making people squirm in their seats is kind of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Kalev, do you have anything to say on like crescendos and emotional violence and how you kind of address that as a horror creator?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I know someone mentioned the philosophy of how it's done. And there's a few different ways of going about it. Like, you could look at it from, as someone mentioned, a nihilistic perspective. The world is just a rotating ball of chaos, and then we're here until we're dead. Or you can try to piece some kind of grander meaning throughout your film and say, hey, well, sure, things are bad, but there's the possibility of things being not quite so bad. But beyond that, as far as emotional violence in film, I think violence and life are inseparable. Mm-hmm. I'm personally opposed to most forms of violence unless absolutely necessary. Granted, if you were to look at my career path up until this point, you would have questions about that, but that's neither here nor there. I've been involved in military circumstances. Not overseas, just, well, a little bit overseas, but just mostly here. Anyhow, I'm opposed to violence in real life, but as far as violence on screen, I don't really like it so much. Mm-hmm. I do like it being saved for something meaningful, but Dale and Tucker versus Evil is a fantastic example of violence being on screen for a comedic effect, and that's also something that's really great. Or you can have a film that terrifies people without really showing much in the way of violence. Hereditary did have the one scene where the girl lost her head. but beyond that, it was a very subdued film, and yet it's bothered me to this very day.
Yeah, I think a lot of us feel that way, honestly. Certainly bothers me. Matteo, do you have anything to talk about philosophy of, that emotional crescendo in horror, violence?
I don't think I have a philosophy about violence in films, but I agree with Paul. As long as it moves the story forward, and as long as it's related to, characters' introspections and the themes of the movie. I mean, horror is such a powerful genre, also because it is deeply related with violence, and violence is an aspect of our own lives. So, but I think that I like that violence not only in the gore or in the blood, and I like it also as some kind of language. I mean, editing, that is probably the only real distinctive element of cinema. Editing is all about that. So, editing, even if we try to make it invisible, editing, it's violent because you can't see it. So, I think that, if you think at that wonderful scene in the new Suspiria by Luca Guadagnino, I'm talking about I'm thinking at the cross-cutting dance sequence.
Yes.
In which Susie's dancing, and meanwhile she's affecting the other dancer in the other room. So her dance moves are spells, that and I think that's wonderful, and that's a really violent scene. But I don't think that's it. I like that because it's deeply related with the roots of the story. I mean, she's sending her spells through movement, and that's wonderful, because dance is a language of our own body, and in the new Suspiria, it's a language of the dancers, and it's a way of possession. So I like that.
Violence also, there's a perception of it too, because like I said, I'm older than probably all of you, but the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974, it was considered, high. It's one of my favorite movies. It's such a well-done movie. There's no blood.
Yeah, it's all editing.
It's quick cuts, editing, and sound. But when they did the remake in the early 2000s, which I also enjoyed, they did a really good job. Almost every interview in pre-production, they're like, "Well, it's not as bloody as the original. We're toning it. It's not going to be as bloody as the original." And there's no blood. But everybody had this memory of this movie just being this horrific bloodbath because of the editing and sound. Like, it's an unsung hero of movies that don't get enough credit. Sound designers are amazing.
Adam, well, your film definitely has some very interesting violence in it. Definitely violence to the viewers because of some of the stuff you put in front of our eyes. But how do you feel about all of this?
Yeah, well, I just pretty much to echo what everybody else said, where it's like, I guess it just depends on when it comes to violence, is it necessary in the story? I don't. I'm not a big fan of it, but I do understand its importance. I guess, I mean, violence in movies and on screen, could also be, cathartic in a way or something, because it's just like, we're, as humans, we're just kind of violent in nature, and so I don't know if having a release for that on screen is a good thing. To not act it out in real life, maybe, or something like that. But so yeah, I think it's interesting that when you're talking about Blissberger applying violence to it, it's an interesting way of looking at it, because it's because I always thought my mind is not really working in that way. Is when it comes to making movies and telling stories, I usually don't tend to lean towards violence much. I was actually one of the reasons like maybe it's kind of a dorky thing or something, but one of the reasons I was pretty proud of Blissburger was I saw it as it's disturbing to people, but I always saw it as it's pretty much a PG-13 movie. You know, there's no violence towards people in it, you know, and a host of other things, like there's no cussing or nudity or sex or anything like that. And I mean, that wasn't intended. It just, the movie just came out that way. But yeah, I guess that's just pretty much just to echo what everyone else said, you know, it's just, is it necessary for the story, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do short films as well. I enjoy sets. I enjoy all of that stuff. And I think one of the most entertaining questions you can throw in a room of people who have been on sets and do any type of horror things, especially low budget horror, is what is the best set story you can think of from any of those projects? And Paul, I know you're here for screenwriting, but it seems like you do have like set experience. So yeah, I mean,
Well, I've been lucky enough to I was able to film a few things, you know, music video here, you know, promotional video for a company. I'm involved with a couple of short films, and then like I said, Rest Stop, I was able to direct that one, and probably one of my favorite memories, and this just goes to show how great the cast was, is of course we're filming. There's an area in Southern California that is, you know, inland, but it's mountainy, and there's like apple orchards, and it's like Oak Glen, Yucaipa area. And it just so happened that particular weekend was like the coldest weekend of the year. And we're not, you know, it's the time setting, everything, everybody's dressed casual and things. So it's like, you know, 36 degrees, which in California, that's cold.
yeah.
And we're shooting at night. And that's the night that the camera rig that we rented is not assembling correctly. And we're already 2 hours behind. And it's just, and the cinematographer, he's trying DP, they're just putting everything together, trying to do like that. He keeps telling me 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, okay, well, I gotta go talk to everybody. I gotta go talk to the crew, I gotta talk to the cast, I gotta see how everybody's doing. And we'd have a tent set up in the back with some heaters and coffee and all this other stuff, so everybody had a place to keep warm. So I'm going back there, I'm thinking, man, these people are professionals and they're sitting here in the middle of nowhere, freezing, and we're behind schedule. And I was like, okay, I gotta go talk to the troops. And I come around the corner and they're laughing and having a good time. And someone's doing like a Facebook Live and interviewing everybody else and just having a blast. I'd come around the corner, they're like, oh, look, here's our director. And they got me on camera and everybody just was enjoying everybody's time and having a good time. And that was like, I was like, okay, well, I guess this is normal to be behind, but I don't like it. I come from a construction background where you're behind when you're behind on day one. So you just need to keep moving. But that was probably one of my favorite stories, just showing how great the group of people we had together were. Is we always, even with that running late, we still finished early that day. We always seemed to finish early, and we got everything we needed, and everybody was having fun, even though it was freezing. So that's probably one of my favorite set stories.
Yeah, those are always good days. Always good days. Matteo, was there any interesting things that happened on your set?
Well, I have a funny and somehow creepy episode. We found, you know, we shot in this kind of basement of this condominium in Italy. So it was like an abandoned place. And we found that dead black cat on set practically. And I wanted to shoot it, the dead body, but my director of photography convinced me not to do it. So that's probably the most memorable thing happened on set, because we were, you know, some kind of little crew, all made up by cinema student. So I made this short film in order to graduate at the Academy of Fine Arts here in Italy. So it was some kind of Call of Duty, and we made it with no budget practically. So it was, you know, it wasn't a controlled set. We shot it with masks months before COVID, you know, so it was dusty, and, you know, we probably were the only human beings going there by years.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, yeah, you encounter just the weirdest stuff whenever you go to places like low budget sets where you go to random locations and then suddenly, oh, there's a dead cat there. Wow. Okay.
And it was renovated, completely renovated, so that place doesn't exist anymore, in our reality. So it only exists in the reality of the short.
So you got the image of it, the last image anybody's ever going to see of it, that you can
Yeah,
widely distribute.
days after we shot, it was completely renovated just in time.
Lucky, really lucky. Kalev, was there anything entertaining or anything crazy that went on during your set?
During my production, no, but I have worked on some less than professional sets in the past. Where this one time we were shooting at an abandoned waterworks, and
Oh dear.
we found this out on the day, but apparently some folks had been using some of the trenches to shoot up heroin in, and we found this out because we saw like needles with syringes floating in the water. And we'd been trudging through it for a couple of hours.
Oh God.
Oh. That is, yeah, okay.
I have another
Yeah, I
one.
mean it's not preferable, but
Yeah, it's, I mean, if that is one of those, that's one of those horror stories you hear from low budget horror sets. Just
Oh
weird
no,
stuff
that one, it
happening.
wasn't a
Oh,
horror film. It was
it
more of
wasn't
like
horror
a
sets?
feature-length
Oh, okay.
art something or other. I'm not entirely
Mm,
sure of what it was.
okay. Okay. And Adam, was there anything interesting that happened on the Bliss Burger set? Anything with that special effects? That weird burger pod with the stuff sticking out of it.
Yeah, no, I guess not really. It's just like it's when you're in the moment working with practical effects like that, it's stressful because all kinds of things go wrong with it, and
Hmm.
you're doing triage a lot of the time, just trying to patch this thing up in places where it like tears, and but looking back on it in retrospect, it was some of the funnest work I've ever done, and I really would like to do more practical effects in the future. And yeah, I guess it's kind of similar to what other people said. Shooting that movie, the location was super interesting. It was like a 3-story house in Flint, Michigan, and it was originally built in the early 1900s by a physician, and the third floor that we were on had not been renovated since he had originally, or like not long after he built the house. And he actually housed patients up there. So like on the third floor, there was like 2 little apartments, and it looked like it was straight out of the 40s. It had the refrigerators were like in the wall, and they were from the 40s and stuff. And so there's just a lot of creepy vibes up there, because like you just knew that, there was sick patients who were living up in those, that this physician was like housing up there in his house. That was kind of weird.
Yeah, you really do pick up on like these just weird stories and weird like feelings, weird just yeah, that I can't imagine that was I can imagine that was interesting. Paul, you mentioned that there's something else.
Oh, this is a really quick one. Just remembered
Hmm.
it. I was a writer on the short film, but I basically volunteered to help with the production. It was a no budget thing. I was like, whatever you need to do. And I ended up becoming like the location person, and you know, we're shooting on the side of a highway up in the mountains that we
Okay.
found out on the day that we didn't have a permit for this road, but
Oh,
we were assured by the director, no one drives up here. Yeah, that wasn't the case. So we had a walkie system going on. So we'd set up, I would take some point of high ground and I would call out car or this, that, and the other, even when we're shooting on the side of the road, just for sound. And there was just a point in time where I was calling car, truck, car, and like they were just having to stop all these different shots, and everybody's getting frustrated. And then they're doing one, and they're almost through the take, and I yell horse, and the boom guy thought I was pulling a prank, and he turned around and looked at me like he was going to come across the highway and wrap the boom around my neck. And I just pointed, and sure enough, there's 2 people just trotting. And they saw us there. They just took their time, and we all just stood there in silence, waiting for these people to get out of earshot with these horses. But I will never forget the look on that guy's face when I yelled horse. So that's a so.
That's a good one. Yeah. Yeah, cars and just planes and trains and everything if you're around cities. It's just very rough, very awful. Um, so I like to end off these like group interviews, any of the interviews that I do with a really, really, really just easy, laid back question, which is if you could think of a horror film right off the top of your head, anything, just anything right now, don't even think about it. What would you recommend to the audience that's watching right now?
There's so many. I don't know.
I'm gonna put you on the spot, guys.
Honestly, one of my favorite movies in the past few years is Joe Lynch's Mayhem. It's on
Mm,
Shudder. It's it's kind of a horror movie. It's pretty violent. It's pretty bloody. It's fun. It's funny. It's kind of a jab at corporate systems in general, but it's just a fun action bloody ride. Like if I need to pick me up and I'm working on stuff and I need something to put a smile on my face, I go to Shudder and I fire up Mayhem.
fun, excellent. Adam?
I mean, you said don't think about it, and so like the first thing that popped up in my mind is Shining, but who hasn't seen it? When it comes to horror films, and that's what I always go back to.
I mean, there's a reason why we all talk about it. Um, yeah, it just works. It's certainly my favorite horror film. Matteo, anything?
Well, I have to say Carnival of Souls.
Hmm.
That is little independent horror film from the 60s. And I think it's somehow related to my short, in the way it portrays, mental derangement through a supernatural element. So I have to say that Carnival of Souls, great movie.
Yeah, it is excellent, excellent, and it's in the public domain, so you can basically watch it anywhere you want to. And Kalev?
Okay, actually, I've got two films. They're
All
both
right.
very oddball.
Hmm.
Hausu, or House as it's also
Yeah.
called. It's a Japanese film, fantastically weird. WTF throughout. It's got some very stereotypical, like archetypical characters, but it's beautiful. Second film is going to be Raw. It is also a
Hmm.
WTF film, but in the visceral sort of like, I can't believe that I'm watching this kind of way.
Yeah, I love Obayishi. I think House is great. Raw is the one movie that I think I've seen in the past 5 years that I've seen a sequence of that I was like, I feel sick. I don't know what's going on. I don't know how I'm going to react to this. Yeah, those are both very good, very good. All righty. And I think that wraps us up. So just where can we find you guys on social media? Where can we find your films coming up? Where can we find any of that stuff?
Well, I'm under my name on Instagram and Facebook and on Twitter. It's on my name, and then I'm really happy to share scripts and do reads and give notes. And I do have that short film. It's a Stephen King thing. The part of the option agreement I have is that I can't put it on YouTube and I can't put it online, but I can send a private link. So if anybody wants to check it out, just hit me up and I can send a link for it.
Excellent, excellent. Adam?
Blissburger movie. Just all one word, Blissburger movie. That's you can find that on Facebook and Instagram. And we have all, you can go on there and see where it's playing next.
Excellent, excellent. Matteo?
Within Movie on Instagram, and we hope to broadcast it on streaming platforms soon.
Right. Well, that's fantastic. And Kalev, where can we find your work? Where can we find anything you worked on?
Okay, because of the current film festival circuit thing, it is not available on YouTube just yet. It will be sometime next year, but if you want to see it, I'll send you a private link. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram under the name Kalev Carrow. I also have a personal website, but that just deals with my IT stuff. So there's that. Beyond that, I've possibly got a feature-length film coming up, but we'll see.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, congratulations on that. And I've been Steven Thronichek for HorrorOrigins.com. This is a reminder that HorrorOrigins is a website where you can find articles, interviews, and reviews. And we also run our very own film festival and screenplay competition. Thank you so much, guys. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy your
Right.
Have a good day, everybody.
And now I'm going to hit
Have a good one.